Officer Carter sees a confident black woman on a park bench and thinks she's just another nobody to command. Another citizen to cuff, no questions asked. But what he doesn't know, she's Judge Camille Johnson, and tomorrow she'll preside over his misconduct hearing. Stick around, because when the cameras roll and Badge Falls goes viral, Carter's badge won't shield him. It'll break him. Justice isn't just a word today. It's personal, and it's coming for him. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time you found this video. Don't miss out on future content by subscribing now. Officer James Carter's badge caught the autumn sunlight as he scanned Central Park, his authority as tangible as the crisp October air. 20 years on the force had taught him to trust his instincts, and something about the well-dressed black woman on the bench didn't sit right with him. She was too composed, too confident for this part of the park. His partner, Officer Michael Daniels, had noticed her too. "Look at those clothes," Officer James Carter muttered, fingers unconsciously polishing his badge. "Designer stuff. Probably lifted." The familiar weight of his handcuffs tapped against his hip as he moved, a rhythmic reminder of his power. Heart quickening with anticipation, Officer James Carter approached the bench, his shadow falling across her book. The woman didn't even look up, and that defiance made his jaw clench. "Ma'am, we're going to need some identification." His voice carried that special edge he'd perfected over years of service, the tone that reminded civilians who was in charge. The metallic click of his handcuffs unclipping from his belt echoed across the suddenly silent park. A teenager's phone rose up from the gathering crowd, its lens capturing every moment. Officer James Carter felt a flutter of satisfaction as the woman finally looked up, her composed expression only fueling his certainty. "Is there a problem, officer?" Her calm voice carried an educated accent that scraped against his nerves. "Stand up slowly," Officer James Carter commanded, hand resting on his cuffs. The familiar surge of power coursed through him as she complied. "Hands where I can see them." A murmur rippled through the growing crowd. More phones appeared, their cameras gleaming like accusations in the autumn light. Central Park shame would start trending within minutes, but Officer James Carter didn't know that yet. "I am Judge Camille Johnson of the Superior Court," the woman stated quietly, still maintaining that infuriating composure. "And you are making a serious mistake." Officer James Carter's laugh cut through the park. "Sure you are. And I'm the Chief Justice. Hands behind your back." The handcuffs clicked shut with satisfying finality. Only then did he notice the court ID that had fallen from her designer bag, the gold judicial seal catching the sunlight like an omen. As the reality of his situation began to dawn, a young lawyer in the crowd shouted, "That's Judge Johnson! She's presiding over the police misconduct hearings next month!" For the first time in 20 years, Officer James Carter felt his badge's weight as a burden rather than a shield. His inner certainty cracked like thin ice underfoot. Inner reflection. 20 years of snap judgments, of trust your instincts, of seeing threats in faces that didn't look like mine. How many others had there been? How many times had I been wrong? The badge that gave me power now felt like it was burning through my uniform, marking me for what I truly was. Type Badge Falls if you've ever watched someone's power crumble in real time. The park had fallen silent, except for the whisper of phone cameras and the rustle of autumn leaves. Officer James Carter's world had narrowed to the sight of that judicial ID glinting in the grass, his future dissolving with each passing second. The great question hung in the air like smoke. How does a man face judgment from the very person he wrongly judged? His partner's retreating footsteps told him he stood alone now, but Officer James Carter couldn't move. He remained frozen in place, watching as his 20 years of authority evaporated in the time it took to make one catastrophically wrong decision. The handcuff's key felt impossibly heavy in his trembling hand. Officer James Carter watched the video for the 20th time, each viewing making his collar feel tighter. The footage was damning, his own voice dripping with condescension as he approached Judge Johnson, his hands roughly grabbing her arms despite her calm protests. The precinct's fluorescent lights seemed to burn brighter than usual, highlighting every nervous face that turned away when he walked past. "Your history of complaints just resurfaced, Carter." Lieutenant Rivera's words from an hour ago still rang in his ears. 7 incidents of excessive force against minorities in the past 2 years, all swept under the rug because nobody had enough influence to challenge you. Until now. Officer James Carter's fingers traced the edge of his badge, the metal cold against his skin. The weight of it felt different today, like a burden rather than a symbol of authority. His mind wandered to academy days, to field training officer Matthews, who had pulled him aside after that first controversial arrest. "Listen, kid, some people just need a firmer hand. You show them who's boss early, they'll never give you trouble. The paperwork always works out." The professional conduct manual sat open on his desk, mocking him with regulations he'd deliberately ignored. Recent studies on racial profiling in law enforcement flashed across his computer screen. Research he'd dismissed as liberal propaganda now painted a devastating picture of his own behavior patterns. His phone buzzed again. Another notification, #CopsCaught, had evolved into #Carter Accountability, with over 100,000 tweets and climbing. His chest tightened as he scrolled through comments calling for his termination, for criminal charges, for justice. The security footage from other incidents was being scrutinized now, frame by frame, by journalists and activists alike. "Have you seen this?" Officer Michael Daniels slapped a newspaper on his desk. The headline screamed, "Pattern of Abuse. Officer James Carter's History of Racial Profiling Exposed." His partner's face was ashen. "They're saying we're the poster boys for everything wrong with the system." Officer James Carter's hand instinctively went to his badge again, clutching it like a lifeline. The precinct walls seemed to close in as memories flooded back, subtle warnings from internal affairs, complaints that disappeared, witnesses who were intimidated into silence. The system that had protected him for so long was crumbling. Inner reflection. Every time I pinned on this badge, I told myself I was maintaining order. But whose order? The power felt so natural, so right. Now I see the faces of everyone I've wronged, each one looking at me with the same dignity Judge Johnson showed. Did I become the very threat I swore to protect against? A text from his union representative only heightened his anxiety. "Emergency meeting at 4 p.m. Chief wants all body cam footage from your last 6 months. Stay silent until we talk." Type "truth" if you've ever had your world turned upside down, the social media campaign demanded, trending alongside his name. Each notification felt like another nail in his career's coffin. The evidence was mounting, not just against him, but against the entire chain of command that had enabled his behavior. His supervisor's earlier words echoed, "This isn't just about you anymore, Carter. Judge Johnson's case has opened Pandora's box." Officer James Carter stared at his reflection in the computer screen, barely recognizing himself. The man who had strutted through Central Park yesterday, confident in his untouchable status, now sat hunched over, watching his carefully constructed world disintegrate. The truth was spreading like wildfire. and for the first time in his career, his badge couldn't shield him from the consequences of his actions. Officer James Carter stared at his phone, his stomach churning as the video's view count climbed past 1 million. 6 hours had passed since the Central Park incident, but it felt like an eternity. Every news channel blazed with his shame, the footage playing on an endless loop. Him approaching Judge Camille Johnson, his voice dripping with unearned authority, his hands reaching for cuffs that should have stayed on his belt. The chief's words still rang in his ears. Administrative leave, effective immediately. His badge, now locked in a drawer at home, seemed to mock him through the wood. Officer James Carter had always seen that badge as a shield, but now it felt more like a target painted on his back. CNN's headline crawled across his screen. Officers face investigation after racial profiling of federal judge. His partner, Officer Michael Daniels, had already started distancing himself. Carter made the call, he'd told Internal Affairs. I just followed procedure. The betrayal stung worse than the protesters' chants outside the precinct. Officer James Carter's phone buzzed again. Another text from his wife. Coming home late? Can't deal with this right now. The message felt like ice in his veins. Even she couldn't look him in the eye anymore. Cartergate was trending nationwide. Social media analysts estimated it would reach 10 million impressions by nightfall. Officer James Carter watched his reputation crumble in real time, each retweet another nail in his career's coffin. The protesters' chants grew louder outside the precinct. No more power, no more hate. Officer James Carter peered through the blinds, seeing signs bearing his face, his name, his shame. Some held photos of Judge Johnson, her credentials displayed prominently, a stark reminder of his catastrophic mistake. His desk phone rang. Internal Affairs again. Officer James Carter let it go to voicemail, his hands shaking too much to trust his voice. The thin blue line he'd counted on for protection was fracturing. Fellow officers walked past his desk without making eye contact, their silence deafening. Have you seen what they're saying about us? Officer Michael Daniels hissed, shoving his phone in Officer James Carter's face. They're digging up every complaint ever filed against us, every stop, every arrest. They're calling it a pattern. Officer James Carter's throat tightened as he scrolled through the coverage. Old cases were being scrutinized, witnesses coming forward with similar stories of profiling. His past, once safely buried in filing cabinets and dismissed complaints, was rising to haunt him. The chief's secretary appeared at his desk. Judge Johnson's office called. The hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning. She paused, her voice dropping. She'll be presiding. Officer James Carter slumped in his chair, the irony crushing him. The very woman he'd humiliated would now hold his fate in her hands. His arrogance from this morning felt like a distant memory, replaced by a gnawing fear that grew with each passing hour. Type karma if you've ever seen justice come full circle. In the precinct bathroom, Officer James Carter splashed cold water on his face, avoiding his reflection. The weight of consequences pressed down on him like a physical force. His career, his reputation, his family, everything he'd built was unraveling because of 10 minutes of unchecked power. His phone buzzed one final time. Footage of Judge Johnson speaking on the courthouse steps, her voice steady and powerful. No one is above the law, she declared. Not even those sworn to uphold it. Officer James Carter's hands gripped the sink as her words echoed through the precinct's halls. The universe had a cruel sense of humor, he thought, bringing him full circle to face the very authority he'd tried to diminish. Tomorrow, he would stand before her bench, no longer an officer dispensing justice, but a man answering for his actions. The sun set on the longest day of Officer James Carter's life, casting long shadows through the precinct windows. Outside, the protesters' chants continued, a relentless reminder of how quickly power could shift, how swiftly justice could turn the tables. He gathered his things, avoiding the locker room where his empty badge holder waited, a hollow symbol of everything he stood to lose. Officer James Carter stepped into the marble-floored courtroom, each footfall echoing like a gavel strike against his conscience. His polished badge, pinned precisely to his chest as it had been thousands of times before, now felt heavier than ever. The familiar weight had transformed from a symbol of pride into a crushing burden of shame. The whispers rippled through the gallery like wind through dying leaves as he walked past. Central Park. Justice was trending again. He'd seen it on his phone just before entering, along with the viral video of their arrest of Judge Johnson replaying on every major network. His hands trembled slightly as he straightened his tie, a gesture that once projected authority, but now betrayed his mounting anxiety. "All rise!" The bailiff's voice boomed through the chamber. Officer James Carter's stomach lurched as Judge Camille Johnson entered, her robes flowing with quiet dignity. Their eyes met for a brief, electric moment. The same woman he and Officer Michael Daniels had humiliated in Central Park now held their fate in her hands. The cosmic poetry of it all made him feel dizzy. "Officer James Carter, please approach the witness stand." His legs felt like lead as he moved forward. Just before Carter stepped forward, Daniels grabbed his arm in a fierce grip. "Stick to the statement, James," Daniels hissed under his breath. "You open your mouth, you take us both down." Carter yanked free, heart pounding. His whole career, the Brotherhood had been the code. Protect each other, no matter what. But standing here, under Judge Johnson's unwavering gaze, with the whole world watching, he saw clearly. It wasn't just about loyalty to a partner. It was loyalty to the truth. Daniel's voice sliced in again, low and urgent. "Don't be a damn fool, James." Carter exhaled slowly. "Maybe for the first time, I have to be." As he raised his right hand to take the oath, Officer James Carter caught his reflection in the polished wood of the judge's bench. The man staring back at him looked haunted, aged by more than just the 18 hours since their arrest had gone viral. His finger traced the edge of his badge, remembering how proudly he'd polished it that morning in a desperate attempt to feel worthy of wearing it. "Officer Carter, please recount the events of April 15th in Central Park." Judge Johnson's voice carried no hint of personal vendetta, only calm judicial authority. It made everything worse. He'd expected anger, wanted it even. Anything would be better than this professional detachment that forced him to confront his actions purely on their merit. The prepared statement burned in his breast pocket, the one Officer Michael Daniels had insisted they both memorize. But as Officer James Carter opened his mouth, he found different words forming. "Your Honor, His voice cracked. The gallery leaned forward. Someone's phone camera clicked. Carter cleared his throat, fingers twitching near his breast pocket where the rehearsed statement lay. "Your Honor, he began, eyes darting to Daniels, whose tight-lipped stare drilled into his back. "We followed standard procedure." The suspect matched prior descriptions. There was confusion. Judge Johnson's gaze didn't waver. Neither did the cameras capturing every word. "Officer Carter," she said evenly, "the body cam footage was submitted this morning." Would you like us to play it now?" A hush swept the room. Carter felt the blood drain from his face as memory crashed over him. The clips, the audio, the unmistakable tone in his own voice as he dismissed her ID, tightened the cuffs. His chest constricted. There was no escape hatch left, not for blame, not for excuses, and for the first time in his career, the armor of denial cracked wide open. He let the papers slip from his hands. "The truth is, we were wrong." The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Then came the furious tapping of journalists' fingers on phones, the muffled gasps, the rustle of movement as the story began spreading beyond these walls. "Officer confesses" would be trending within the hour, he knew. But for once, Officer James Carter didn't care about the public reaction. For the first time since pinning on his badge, he felt something like peace. "Continue, Officer Carter." Judge Johnson's voice remained steady, but there was something in her eyes now. Not triumph, but something more profound. Recognition, perhaps, of the cost and value of truth. And so he did continue, detailing every mistake, every abuse of power, every moment when they could have chosen differently. His testimony lasted nearly an hour, each word stripping away another layer of the protective armor he'd built around himself over years of looking the other way, of justifying small corruptions in the name of brotherhood. As he finally stepped down from the witness stand, Officer James Carter unpinned his badge. The small metallic click seemed to echo in the hushed courtroom. He placed it on the evidence table, no longer a symbol of authority, but a piece of evidence in his own transformation. Type, "Truth breaks chains," if you believe one moment of honesty can change everything, the viral clips would prompt later, as his testimony spread across social media platforms. But in that moment, Officer James Carter wasn't thinking about viral fame or public redemption. He was thinking about the weight that had lifted from his shoulders and how the hardest path had somehow become the only one he could bear to walk. Let them strip the badge away permanently. He'd already removed it himself, in the only way that mattered. Officer James Carter's hands trembled as he stood before the bench, the same bench where he had arrogantly wielded power just 24 hours ago. The courtroom's silence pressed against him like a physical weight, broken only by the steady tick of the wall clock marking each excruciating second of his final judgment. "The evidence speaks for itself," Judge Johnson's voice carried through the chamber, steady and clear. Officer James Carter felt his throat constrict, remembering how he had sneered at this same woman in Central Park, how his prejudice had blinded him to her dignity, her position, her humanity. The badge on his chest, once a symbol of his perceived authority, now felt like it was burning through his uniform. Officer James Carter's fingers traced its edges one last time, each ridge and valley a reminder of the power he had so grievously misused. The livestream cameras captured every moment, their red lights blinking accusingly. Judge Carter's fall was already trending nationwide, his shame immortalized in millions of shares. "Officer James Carter," Judge Johnson's words cut through his thoughts. "This court finds your actions not just legally wrong, but fundamentally contrary to the sacred trust placed in law enforcement." His legs weakened as she continued. "However, this moment calls for more than punishment. It demands transformation." The judge's gavel struck with precise purpose, each tap echoing through Officer James Carter's bones. "You will surrender your badge permanently," she declared, "but your experience will serve a greater purpose. Your body camera footage, your testimony, and the consequences of your actions will become mandatory training material for every new recruit in this department." Officer James Carter's hand moved mechanically to his chest, unpinning the badge that had defined him for 15 years. The metallic click as it hit the evidence table seemed to reverberate forever. Across social media, millions watched as #police accountability surged alongside his story. "Let this be clear," Judge Johnson continued, her words piercing Officer James Carter's carefully constructed walls of justification. "True justice requires change, not just punishment. Your department will undergo mandatory reform training, and your case will serve as a watershed moment in our commitment to equal protection under the law." Standing there, stripped of his authority, Officer James Carter finally understood with crushing clarity. His power had never been absolute. It had been borrowed, a trust from the very communities he had failed to serve. His eyes met Judge Johnson's, and for the first time he saw not a target of his prejudice, but a mirror reflecting his own humanity back at him. The footage from that day became more than just a training video. It became a viral testament to accountability, reshaping department policies across the country. Officer James Carter's name became synonymous not just with failure, but with the possibility of institutional change. Type 1, if you believe one person's awakening can transform a system. As he left the courthouse, reporters' cameras flashing like lightning, Officer James Carter spoke his final words as a police officer. "I protected the wrong things, my pride, my prejudices, my power. True protection means serving all citizens equally. That's the lesson I learned too late, but one I hope others will learn from my fall." His former badge now rests in a display case at the Police Academy's Ethics Training Center, a permanent reminder that justice, when it finally arrives, comes not with vengeance, but with the opportunity for transformation. Officer James Carter's story ended where it began, in a moment of profound humility before the law. But this time, he finally understood which side of justice he had really been on. Share this story if you believe accountability can lead to real change. Carter's fall, police accountability.